into this, I had already watched this debate, and it was one of the most painful watches of my life the first time, and I have dedicated much of my life to watching Disney live-action remakes, and even making videos on this very channel. Even at 1.5 times speed, it was still a painful watch. So with that being said, I decided to go on my own way and make an entire review slash recap slash watch video of the debate, as to potentially save others from needing to watch the entire 4.5 hours of this video. This is a normie-friendly video, if you will, for those who are less informed of the drama and or want to be informed of the drama. Now, assuming if you're seeing this video, you have some concept of the ongoing beef between Ethan Klein of H3 Productions slash podcast slash studios slash whatever, I'll call it H3 from this point moving forward, and Hasan Piker of Hasan Abi. But if not, let me give you a baseline introduction to both of these content creators and some context on their beef. Ethan Klein, also known as H3, was once a comedy YouTube channel that has been begun in more recent years to lean more into the leftist political commentary, mainly focusing on going against right-wing creators and slamming them on his podcast broadcast format. Hasan Piker is a political commentator through the medium of Twitch live streaming who reacts to all kinds of political related content, as well as doing more normie-based content such as the occasional tier list and or gaming stream. Both have swings themselves pretty firmly in the YouTube and general social media political content creator space and sphere, being some of the largest leftist voices in the now space. Now, full transparency, I am a Hasan viewer and a former H3 viewer. I was specifically a viewer of H3 between the time of Frenemies and Leftovers, finding myself departing from their content after Leftovers had ended. I am not very well versed in the current H3H3 content, but I am pretty well versed in Hasan's, but I do have a general understanding of what H3 produces nowadays, but take what I say with a grain of salt in that regard, because I can't give you the full context. Regardless, this video will have almost nothing to do with their previous and or future content, and rather will focus on being a short, normie-friendly review of the debate in which we have all hopefully bared witness to both of these content creators have taken part in. I will remove this from either of their content, and on my own basis and best of my ability, I will make an attempt to have context/judgment beyond what I say in the debate itself. With that being said, let's get into the debate and what my takeaways are from it. In the very beginning of the debate, the point felt lost to me as a viewer. They start off with the concept of Zionism and defining that term to create a middle ground for themselves as well as the viewer, but that fastly transitions into a conversation around YouTuber iDubbbz, then known as and now known as Content Cop, on H3H3 and or Ethan himself. This conversation that continues on pretty constantly and is dropped and readdressed over and over again with basically no resolution or middle ground being found on it at any point. For this specific part of the debate, I want to say that Ethan isn't entirely off base for asking questions of a content Hasan is featured in, if this is what the debate was based on, that is. But I don't think it was. Going into this, I would love to know what both of these two signed up for in establishing talking points and or conversations that are approved by both sides, which I really don't think happened. I think this would save them in a lot of the derails they went on and a lot of the different subjects that they chose to tackle for basically seemingly no reason. This is not limited to iDubbbz's Content Cop, but it was one of the most used examples to derail conversations and differentiate the conversation away from the point of the conversation at the time and what it was supposed to be. Now, I don't know the behind the scenes of what this conversation was meant to be about, but my assumption, based on the history of these two arguments they've had through internet videos with one another, is that the debate was meant to be based on Zionism, anti-Semitism, and conflict taking place in Palestine and Israel. These are the three most consistently brought up subjects throughout the debates, so they are the three arguments I will focus on recapping the most. Another derailing point that happens often in this debate is the discussion around Hasan's collaborators and collaborations. Ethan is constantly harping on Hasan and his collaborators and their actions, both including Hasan and or removing Hasan from the conversation. These include iDubbbz and another content creator named Frogan, mainly and specifically. To the point of the debate, this doesn't bring forth any resounding or important information, as these people are not actually a part of the debate, nor included in the conversation basically at all, and it results in a huge waste of time where Hasan repeats that he is not these people and is not responsible for their decisions, and this results in bringing these people up being a massive waste of time for the viewer and assumedly both of these content creators talking about it. Needless to say, from the debate itself, I did not understand entirely what the goal of the debate was, other than me just guessing. That to me is not a very good debate, and it makes the viewer lose the point of the conversation, leading to a less productive conversation that doesn't benefit either side of the conversation. There's many times in which there is almost a setup for a person to walk into where one is specifically making a talking point as to set up the other for failure. This isn't unusual or even unproductive. In some situations, you can see either side beginning to reconsider and discuss a subject more in depth than they previously have before. I think these can be helpful as long as they are well researched and important to the conversation. My issue comes in when they are petty and annoying. Many times there are out of context or unimportant conversations regarding the subject matter at hand in the debate, or a point being brought up that solely is meant to be a gotcha moment rather than actually contribute to the conversation in which these two content creators are having. What is even worse and made my blood boil was the moments in which one side would mock the other and or attempt to personally get under the other person's skin by making out of context or petty remarks towards them on personal matters such as appearance and personal life choices that was removed from the conversation and had nothing to do with the conversation. Sometimes, these just took away from the argument and the conversation, and if someone did make a petty remark, it made me like them significantly less in the context of actually the conversation at hand. They could be having a very serious conversation about Israel and Palestine, about rape victims, about terrible acts of war, about anti-Semitism, about other content creators and their actions in the space. And then one would mock the other, and it almost felt like the whole conversation would just end there and get derailed and not be important anymore because we insist on making a petty remark instead of actually holding the conversation to what it's supposed to be and actually continuing to have that important conversation. And then finally, there's the rape card. The conversation of rape and sexual assault comes up during this debate, and it is not pretty on either side. The conversation came off as rather insensitive and uncaring for the actual victims across both sides of these content creators. I was not personally a fan of the conversation around rape and sexual assault. It felt like it was to prove a point in either direction instead of actually acknowledging and bringing acknowledgement to a crime and harm in which a crime causes onto victims and what effect that can have on people. I have not personally been affected by such trauma, but I cannot imagine the amount of emotions I would have felt hearing two grown men scream about my trauma and what I have been through, and who is or isn't a victim, or turn to rape as an example to further prove a point and win an argument. What is more disheartening about this talking point is that I know both of these creators to be in the camp of believe all victims, and this goes against both of their own personal policies to use rape as a counterpoint in an argument, and all I can say is do better. Rape is not some gotcha card, nor should it be used as an argument winner. And that part genuinely gave me such a massive ick for both of these creators, and I think you both did a terrible job. Now, I am not delusional enough to have thought that this conversation would have gone smoothly at any moment. Conflict should have a point and resolution. That's how we grow from conflict. There are few conflicts in this video in which there are moments of reconciliation or middle grounds that was found, but some include determining that a person who assaulted Ethan was not a Hasan fan and was in fact an independent party. There was also clarification on Ethan and Hasan's stances on the content creator Bad Empanada, in which they both agreed he's a freak essentially and not a good person to stand by his morals, and they both don't stand by Bad Empanada's morals. They both address the recent obsession they have had with each other, Ethan claiming that Hasan is just as bad and just as obsessed with Ethan as Hasan is as Ethan is with Hasan, and Hasan argued that not to be true, and I can't help but think about how much better both these people's lives would be without thinking about one another ever again. Something they didn't agree on was arguing about the semantics of what a terrorist is. If Anne Frank would have taken up arms against the Nazis, if she were still alive, if that would make her a different person and different historical figure than she would be. All semantics that honestly really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, and really was just to hear them both talk, frankly. Like, that is my opinion. They both wanted to talk, and they both chose to talk. That's for fucking sure. This conversation was just a back and forth on Hasan's stance of terrorism and that violence is sometimes a necessity in situations, and Ethan is diametrically opposed to that stance. And they argued about this point to the floor and through the floor, even though from the beginning of the conversation we knew the stance and the answers they gave were never going to change, making this conversation a massive waste of time. They would constantly bring up another community, which was an interesting point, as both tended to err on the side of I can't control everyone, and or just stating that it wasn't their community that was doing these things. It was yet another strange moment of what was the point in constantly bringing up something that will be resolved. Whether both of them could have a more hands-on approach in their own communities, they have both chosen not to in the context of each other's content. Hasan's community has a negative and bad sentiment towards Ethan's content channels and his community. Ethan's community feels negatively towards Hasan and his community. Both statements are true and really made little sense to come after either of their communities when they are both doing the same thing but on the opposite side of the beef. Another problem I had with the conflict in this conversation, if you'll even call it that, was the constant forced necessity to create content out of it. It felt very disingenuous. There was a constant sentiment of let's move on from this topic if the topic came to a standstill, which I will admit sometimes was definitely necessary. Like, do not get me wrong, sometimes we needed to take that cane and drag both Ethan and Hasan off of the microphone and just move on from some subjects. That, I will admit, sometimes was necessary. Ooh. But sometimes they were discussing serious topics that deserved airtimes and seriousness around them. We need to remember that at the core of this conversation, this is not content. There is a very real conflict happening, a genocide at the core of all of this that deserves to be treated with an air of seriousness, and turning talking points and discussions about this very serious topic into content is a very gross feeling to watch, frankly. So many of the arguments that happened in this debate felt more like a personal petty issue one of them had with the other than an actual important conversation that needed to happen. And what is even worse is when a worthwhile conversation is happening, instead of having a productive conversation around the source material, personal feelings are going to take over and it becomes a petty finger-pointing game at one another instead of actually conversating about it, where they're competing to see who can talk louder over one another. Instead of having a conversation, they both just talk over one another and no attempt is made to have an actual conversation about these very serious issues that they both claim to care a lot about. Truly, I had to pause the VOD while watching it multiple times during the debate. There were many moments where I had to just literally walk away from my computer and take a breath. It's a high-intensity interview, and honestly, I would not recommend it as something that you should watch. I don't think anything productive came out of it, and I really don't think it changed anything in my mind about either side, truly, going into it. Going into this, I was a Hasan fan and an H3 fan. I am still both of those things. If we were to discuss who won or lost, I really don't think there is a winner here. And I think there are two grown men yelling at each other, boiling down an actual crisis, a genocide no less, into an egotistical, ideological screaming match. Frankly, if I'm being honest, this interview / debate / conversation / whatever buzzwords you want to use to get clicks and views made Ethan from H3 look insane. He seems unwell, and it was rather concerning to see him go through the jumps and leaps in which he would go through to prove his point and just see how far his obsession has gotten with Hasan and being in the right, in which he has fallen into with this Hasan beef. It was sad, honestly, it was. As an ex-viewer, it was concerning. I don't know what he does in his free time, but I really think he should go smell the roses and try and enjoy life more than he currently does. I don't actually think this debate made Hasan look good either exactly, but at least I came out of it seeing him as someone with their head on their shoulders and not a crazy person who would look better in a straitjacket than the suit he was wearing. That's not me being anti-Semitic, by the way, Ethan. It's me having an opinion on how you portray yourself to both your audience and other people's audiences. In truth, I hate debate content and all things around debates. The one thing, no... They are 9.8 times out of 10 absolutely useless and meant to just be a jerk-off festival for each side to say, I'm right, and clip farm from one another. Nothing truly productive ever comes out of debates, and this was no exception. Nothing productive came out of this debate. The one thing I hope you can take from this debate is this. We are living through a genocide. That should scare you. It scares me, and it's a horrifying thing to see that in 2025 we are capable of such atrocity. There is no funny bit or side tangent to that or moral thing to say. It is just the truth. Anti-Semitism is also on the rise, and terrible thing that we see gaining popularity. We've been down this road before, and the end of that road is a horrifying mistake we have still yet to get past the repercussions of. Take that away from this debate. The world is horrifying. It's not a movie, it's not a TV show, it's real goddamn life. Stop the rise of anti-Semitism, stay informed, and free Palestine. I have been Enigma. Goodbye.